Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode. This is basically a roundup of all of the releases that I've really enjoyed over the past couple months. Basically quarter 3 of the year, July through September. All of the releases that have really struck me, have really been important to me, and I've been listening to a lot. These are the ones I haven't mentioned yet on the channel, so of course most of my favorite releases are the ones I've spotlighted, and you can check those out. So if you're wondering where's this album, where's that album, it may be one that I've already done a review for, so I didn't want to rehash that information all over again. Maybe in the description I'll put links to all of those other videos that I've done throughout this quarter. But these are kind of the leftovers, the ones I haven't gotten to, that I am just going to do a short rundown and go through my list. And it's in alphabetical order by artist. And most of these came out, like I said, in the last couple months. There's a couple of exceptions of albums I personally discovered that have really connected with me over the course of the last couple months, but they're all releases from this year. It's a big variety pack of a lot of different things. Some may not be to your taste. There's a couple intense, heavier, extreme metal stuff in here, which isn't typically my bag, but there's a couple that have really connected with me and that I really enjoyed and I wanted to put on the list here. There's some things that maybe lean a bit into a poppier element, but plenty of traditional prog, plenty of Neo-Prog, plenty of different things on display here that you could all find something to enjoy on this list, I would hope, if you're into progressive rock the same way that I am. I think it's a pretty eclectic list of releases that I want to get into. And so I'm going to hopefully talk maybe a minute or so about each one just to give you an impression and an idea. But mainly the idea is to give you this list to let you go out there and find this music for yourself and enjoy it. If you're looking for new music, if you think that there's not any great music coming out right now, hopefully this will be a showcase for why there is great music to listen to. So first on my list is a band called Anciients, and this is Beyond the Reach of the Sun. This came out August 30th. This is more on the extreme side, so we're starting right off the bat with something more extreme prog metal. This is the first of 3 that remind me quite a bit of Opeth. There's 2 others on the list. And it has a bit of maybe a Mastodon feel, has that kind of stoner, sludgy, psych type feel to it as well. There's mixed vocals, there's some growling, some extreme vocals, but also some clean vocals, similar to Opeth style, like I mentioned. And I like how they go from these like heavier, dark, intense sections to more mellow moments. Lots of great guitar work. They're really experts at their craft on the guitars. Very driving and intricate sound. It's well produced. A lot of hard rocking sections. It's easy to listen to, aside from me not caring much for the growling, as is always a typical thing for me. But beyond that, the music itself is just really cool prog metal stuff that I just really love and find it really driving and a fun listen all the way throughout. So if you're looking for some really cool prog metal and you don't mind a little bit of those heavier vocals, then this might be for you. Second on my list is Anubis and the album The Unforgivable. This is Neo-Prog from Australia. It came out September 6th. Their previous album was called Homeless from 2020, which I quite enjoyed, a bit of a concept record. This one also is a concept album, a continuous song cycle in 10 parts. It's very melodic, emotional, can be heavy at times, leaning more into slight metallic elements, but not full-blown prog metal, I would say. The Chains, part 4 and part 3 alone has a bit of that heavier feel, but it serves the story. There's a great vocal style here. Reminds me a bit of the band Sylvan, which is one of my favorites, a German neo-prog band that has this kind of similar emotional vocal style and really expressive music that tells a story. Some great Gilmour-esque guitar solos, especially in part 5, One Last Thing. Just a really cool, beautiful release that's easy to listen to if you like just your standard neo-prog, similar to bands like Arena, all of those more modern tinged neo-prog bands. I think this could be right up your alley, so a really cool release. Back into a heavier space, the Aphelion, Nascence, came out on August 9th. This is prog metal from Canada. Their previous album, their debut, in fact, was called The Labor Division from 2018. So this is their second record. It's a beautiful concept record that basically talks about a man's descent into madness, and as you might expect from that description, it starts off a little bit more mellow and more traditional prog, but as it continues forward and goes on in the sound, it gets more intense. You get a bit of those kind of brutal screaming vocals as well. But to me, it all services this story about a man going into this descent into his madness and just craziness abounding in his mind. And I think the mayhem and the vocals and the darker tinge kind of works within the storyline. And the singer has a very deep, kind of dramatic voice, maybe even operatic at times. The music is fairly eclectic, especially in the first half. You get like horns and strings, especially in the title track, some almost classical sounding piano at times. A bit of a playful, almost Haken-esque sound. I really like The Seed of Doubt, which has a bit of jazzy bass work and some horns, maybe not unlike Thank You Scientists or something like that. Fragility starts as a really beautiful otherworldly ballad before ramping up intensity, and it just continues forward from there, getting darker, having these brutal riffs and heavier sections and some growling, but it all services the story, and they never lose the core of their prog sound. So really great record, great concept, very emotional, and I think it's well worth checking out. And once again, I leave the kind of warning of, yes, it delves a bit into that heavier prog metal territory if you're not into that. But if you can handle it, I think there's a lot here to enjoy for all prog fans. All right, the next album on my list at number 4 is a band called At Night I Fly, and the album is called Collision/Fusion/Division. They were founded in 2012. This band, their debut full length was Mere Maze in 2019. And this is just really solid progressive metal. A bit of a classic prog metal sound here. Think of Queensryche or Dream Theater or classic Symphony X. But they add in some newer elements that set it apart from just your standard traditional prog metal. Some jazz-inspired moments, like in the ending of Chains. Some Pink Floyd blues psych-style guitar soloing, leading to some 80s synth textures in the middle of Mitosis. Beautiful ballad focused on acoustic guitar and vocals on different skies, and a great vibe in the sky above with almost a 70s funk feel, and great strings and an expressive guitar solo. So a good mishmash of different styles and things going on in the mix. And like I said, a much more traditional prog metal bass. You don't get those heavier, extreme moments like on some of the other albums I've been talking about. So if you're not into the growling, but you do like, some classic prog metal with a little tinge of like some Haken quirkiness, I think this is a really solid release. Really fun to listen to, and one I just recently discovered. So I haven't heard it a whole lot, but it's really grabbed me in my few listens, so I was excited to throw it into my list here. At number 5, I have Burned Out Youth and their album Broken Clocks for the Right Time. This came out August 20th. This is heavy prog from Italy. This is a debut album, and this is a duo formed in Alice, Italy. The band members met in 2016, living in the same university college, sharing a lot of common backgrounds and musical interests, so fast friendship forming. And this album is actually really cool. Has a bit of like a Porcupine Tree, Steven Wilson feel to it. I do find it a bit unpolished, so it's a bit raw and rougher because it's a debut record, so it's their first try at this, but I think there's some really stellar instrumental work if you dig deep into the album. The vocals, could use a little bit more training or more experience perhaps, but I do like the instrumental work. I like how there's a fusion element at times. The guitarist, I think, has a lot of jazzy guitar lines that he goes into. If You Could Only has hints of Thank You Scientist in it. One of the tracks, Bittersweet Recollection, towards the end is a pure jazz song with horns, piano, and stand-up bass with guest female vocals and a bit of Latin-flavored acoustic guitar. So you get a bit of that. You get a bit of more heavy prog, Porcupine Tree style, and some of the sections, some great extended instrumental moments, and just a really cool project from a young, budding duo. I think it's well worth checking out. At number 6, I've got Consider the Source and their album The Stair. This came out September 13th. This is Eclectic Prog from the US. They describe themselves, I believe, as kind of a sci-fi Middle Eastern fusion trio. It's all instrumental music. There's elements of Indian, Balkan, and Arabic folk music alongside jazz fusion and psychedelic rock. So it's a very eclectic stew and mix of music, but it's really captivating and keeps your attention. A lot of different twists and turns, things in the music that you wouldn't expect coming by. Trial by Stone has a cool blend with some metallic touches at times, but never going too heavy or too extreme. Lead guitar can almost sound like a voice at times with these kind of quavery melodies that come in play. I Can See My Eyes is a bit more laid back psychedelia. Mouth Breather has some cool percussive soloing in the middle, some killer funky bass lines, some almost electronic glitchiness, leading to some heavy lift rate and quirky sections. So it's really fun stuff, really interesting. If you like really quirky and different sounds from different places in the world and things that you wouldn't typically hear together, this is a really interesting listen. A great instrumental group that it has a lot of promise and showcases some really cool playing ability that I hadn't heard of this group before, so it's a really solid release, definitely worth highlighting. Quickly at number 7, I have David Gilmour's latest release, Luck and Strange, that came out September 6th. And I think pretty much most people watching this will be familiar with David Gilmour and probably have even already heard this record. But I really enjoyed it. I think it has a cool laid-back style. Not purely prog in my eyes, more like kind of a bluesy rock feel, but that's great too. Has his signature guitar sound all over it. I like the title track that basically came out of a jam session with Richard Wright back in the day, so it's a great nod to his history with Richard Wright and with Pink Floyd, so that's a really cool element. And I like that his daughter Romany has a vocal spotlight here that is just excellent. Between 2 points is just a great performance, and so it's just really pleasant music to put on and really enjoy a signature musician and his style and getting to hear his voice. And, you know, he's an older musician, but he still has all the same chops and just sounds really excellent. And it's great to hear some of the stars of the genre still making music now and making such solid sounds. I really appreciated this release, and I'm sure many of you do as well, but I wanted to point it out in my list here. At number 8, I have Delvine and All Paths Diverge. This came out August 2nd. This is psychedelic space rock from Germany. There's one previous album before this one from this project. This is basically the work of Nick DiSalvo, who's the frontman of the band Elder, if you're familiar. Elder's one of my favorites. Really cool, harder-edged prog with almost a stoner sensibility and cool psych elements. And this has a bit of that at play too. Some cool jazz and psych elements, bit of krautrock perhaps in its style, but a great balance of rocking sections and more laid-back, dreamy psychedelia with vintage keys and guitars. Just a beautiful listen, another one to kind of put on in the background. It's purely instrumental, has a lot of cool passages that grab your ear and that are fun to listen to, but you know, a great blend of more heavier, harder rocking stuff, but then a lot of more laid back things to really drift away to and really enjoy in the background. So a great blend and a great style and well worth checking out for sure. At number 9, I have Giant Sleeper and the album Hyperliminal. This came out on July 9th. This is prog metal from Costa Rica, in fact. I believe this is their full-length debut. Definitely a heavy amount of djent here to their sound, so you can compare them to like modern prog metal like Caligula's Horse or even a bit of Haken. They have a lot of cool complexity and variety going on in their sound, but I don't, you know, sometimes when a band's too djenty, it can just feel a bit monotonous and, you know, like it's copycatting a lot of different bands like Meshuggah and all these Animals as Leaders, bands that really lean heavy into this djenty sound. But I feel like they add their own touch to it. You know, they add their own sensibilities that bring a lot of variety and complexity to the mix. I think they have a bit of like almost a Latin feel. They're from Costa Rica, so they put a bit of that feel into their music. In fact, Well Adjusted adds horns and gives a very jazz-inflected vibe, not unlike Thank You Scientist, very catchy and intricate. The guitar can have a very fluid, jazzy type tone to it. Elucidate has a bit of a Latin influence to it as well. So there's a lot of different cool things going on in the mix. There's some great vocal work, some really cool strings that kind of accent some of these tracks. some expansive instrumental pieces that allow them to show off their chops. I was just really impressed with this. I think this is a really cool up-and-coming prog metal band that you shouldn't sleep on. So it's a really cool release that I wanted to point out. At number 10, this is a bit before the time period we're talking about. This actually came out in May, but I just discovered it over the past couple months, and that's Grandmaster and their self-titled release. This is like 70s jazz rock mixed with prog. From the U.S., this is actually from Austin, Texas, kind of a super group of local funk artists creating an album with a creative prog rock style spirit, but really grounded in like groups like Earth, Wind and Fire or Steely Dan, classic 70s funk and soul, but I really love it. A lot of group style harmony vocals all the way throughout, kind of a clever, eclectic sound, interesting conceptual piece, kind of evoking Dungeons and Dragons type level, but with that funk-inspired sound behind it. There's tracks like Castle Door and Holy Star, really blending these kind of rich brass horns and buoyant piano lines, great harmonies, stacked like a church choir, some heavy bass lines. Just otherworldly and fun to listen to, and ends with this epic piece called Boss Battle, which is kind of your epic instrumental sound. And it's just a really cool release, just that I came out of left field that I didn't expect, but I really love this sound. It's not your typical prog that I tend to talk about, more 70s jazz rock, but it's really fun to listen to, so I hope you guys will check that one out. At number 11, a fantastic release. This is Haven of Echoes and their recent album Memento Vivere. This came out on September 20th. This is crossover prog from Germany. Basically the project of Paul Sadler from Spires and Andreas Hack from Frequency Drift. And it's a fantastic collaboration. Their previous album was called The Indifferent Stars from 2022, which I believe I talked about on the channel. And this album improves upon it, I think. It's just a beautiful record. There's 4 tracks on it, so it's fairly compact. 2 are lengthier, epic style. 2 tracks are more around 8 minutes long. The opener, Epic, is a really incredible one. Transitions from softer, more melodic moments with beautiful vocals to moments of anger and intensity. I was actually surprised that it gets almost into like a metallic feel, just very intense, but you also get some really laid back sections, some beautiful orchestrated elements, some great beauty and atmosphere all the way throughout, a lot of great journey elements. It just continues forward in a lot of different styles. Ad Infinitum is just a gorgeous piece that stays in a more melancholy feel. It kind of reminds me of the recent Return to the Earth and Airbag releases that came out recently, just atmospheric prog at its best. It Walks Among Us still stays at a bit of a slower pace with beautiful melodies, but you get these moments of more sinister darkness, and it transitions to several different types of things as it goes throughout its longer runtime. And Assimilation is just another example of their beautiful sound, but maybe with a bit more of a rock edge to it. Some great synth atmosphere and just more beautiful soundscapes on display. So if you want beautiful atmospheric music with a little bit of a rock edge at times, this is definitely for you. The Paul Sadler's vocals are just heavenly and beautiful to listen to, and it's all backed by just some incredible musicianship. So I just absolutely adore this release. Definitely well worth checking out. Next to number 12, I have Kalandra and A Frame of Mind. This came out September 13th. This is prog folk from Norway. Their debut album, The Line, came out in 2021. So this is a follow-up. Katrine Stenbeck is the vocalist here, and really to me that's the whole focus of the group, is her just beautiful ethereal angelic vocals that perfectly suit this folk style. They have moments of acoustic and traditional folk, but they also can bring a lot of heaviness with some heavier guitars. They add some orchestral majesty to the sound as well. And sometimes they sing like in Norwegian, beautifully evoking their homeland and where they come from, but also lyrics in English as well. Are You Ready is a great track that kind of showcases what you can come to expect from this, with a bit of a catchier feel, but a dark undercurrent underneath. Just a fantastic release that I just love to put on in the background and enjoy this like ethereal vocal performance with some really great instrumentation in the back. Just takes me to other lands and other atmospheres with that really cool folky vibe. I just absolutely adore that record. This one I just recently discovered, Clark Sound and the album What Is Music. This came out June 28th. This is kind of jazz rock, maybe power pop leaning. This is an artist who's here in the United States. Fantastic throwback sound. It sounds like it could be plucked right out of the 70s. A lot of people compare it perhaps to Steely Dan. Has a bit of a catchy pop sensibility, but at the same time is fairly harmonically and rhythmically complex. So it kind of gives that prog edge a little bit to some of the more complex ways that he weaves these sounds and harmonies around. And it's actually one guy, I believe, who's recording all of this stuff, who did all the instruments himself. So it's kind of a one-man band project. The only things that he didn't play himself, I believe, were track 8 vibraphone and woodwinds were played by someone else. But a fantastic record, really cool if you like cool 70s pop music done in a little bit of a quirky way. Really great vocals, great performances. And I just really enjoyed this record. It really caught me off guard, and I just can't stop listening to it. It's one of those that's kind of an addictive listen that grabs you, and you keep wanting to replay it. So that's a lot of fun. At number 14, I almost did a full review of this, but decided against it in favor of other releases that were just grabbing my attention a little bit more. This is Leprous and the album Melodies of Atonement from August 30th. They're labeled on Prog Archives as tech extreme prog metal, but they've kind of shied away from being super extreme, so I wouldn't worry too hard. They are more traditional prog metal at this point. And I think the record suffers a bit from maybe an identity problem because it was heralded as like a return to form to their more extreme earlier sound, but I don't think it really goes all the way there. But it doesn't stay into their more newer sound with more atmosphere and orchestral elements. It kind of shies away from that as well. So I'm not sure who it's really servicing in the Leprous camp, but all in all, it's a good record. It's very solid. Some really cool tracks. I think a lot of them can have a similar sound to them, the same kind of build up. You know, it starts off slow and then you get Einar's vocals just ramping up and giving this like explosion of sound before it settles back into that more laid back groove like it started with. So they all follow a similar structure, but there's a lot of cool stuff in the midst of all that. I love Atonement with a bit of the old school swagger to nod to their earlier sound with a lot of quirkiness. Limbo is a great track with a catchy swing and some great instrumentation. I like the jazzy sensibility of Faceless, which has a bit of almost like a stand-up bass style sound. But it's just a really cool release, just like all the releases are. They have a very signature style and sound. Einar Solberg just has an incredible voice, operatic and expressive, beyond what a lot of other vocalists can do. So definitely well worth checking out, and I think another solid release from them. Number 15, this is a fantastic one. This is Pangu and the album Lampião. This is from September 6th. This is experimental post-metal from Brazil, although I wouldn't really categorize it as that. That was what they were categorized on Prog Archives, but this is a really unique album, really cool. It's all in Portuguese. You know, this is a Brazilian group, and so you won't hear any English on this release, but it doesn't matter in my eyes. I think it's just wonderfully done, and the Portuguese sound just really blends in well with their Brazilian style. It's a bit of a mix of like Zool, prog metal, and Brazilian jazz, perhaps. You even get a little bit of like a Gentle Giant aesthetic, especially in the second half of the record. You have to kind of work your way through the first half. For me, that's the difficult part because there are a little bit of some harsher vocals, not like pure like Opeth style growling, but you know, harsher sounds, chanting vocals, kind of in that Zool aesthetic in a couple tracks, Enciende a Luz and Boatata. But as it goes, it leans more into kind of a classic prog sound with some Brazilian folk music and jazz on top of it. I love some of the later instrumentals that, like I said, bring to mind some Gentle Giant into the mix, utilize classic keyboard sounds like Fender Rhodes, Wurlitzer, and Mellotron. Just a delight to listen to, and contains a lot of cool young vibrancy that I think I'm always craving. Young musicians making this music and making it exciting all over again. So you get some traditional Brazilian jazz like on Sol Raier, danceable beats and some group vocals. I love the jazzy undertones of Maracutai and Ruinas. Just a fantastic selection of music. Well recommended. It's one of my favorite releases of the quarter for sure. And I just absolutely adore it. Even if I'm butchering all the names of the tracks and the album itself, it's definitely worth your time. So please seek it out. I think you'll really love it if you give it a chance. Number 16 is the second of the trilogy of Opeth-style releases. This is Pia Mater, Under the Shadow of a Foreign Sun. This is tech extreme prog metal from Brazil. Their previous album was called The Wandering Daughter from 2018. And yeah, it's just very much in the Opeth-style vein with the mix of clean and heavy extreme vocals. And we get some acoustic lighter passages, some brutal intensity, just like you'd expect from Opeth. I think what sets them apart is their jazzier sensibility, which maybe comes from their Brazilian heritage. They have some standout saxophone moments on the second track, some beautiful strings and flutes that add another layer to the sound. So they're bringing about a style that adds some extra elements to the mix and just makes it beyond just like an Opeth cover group, gives it their own sound and style and sensibility, but definitely inspired by that Opethian sound, which is funny because Opeth has a new record coming out this year, so it's interesting that there's so many solid Opeth-style albums coming out leading up to it, and there's one more at the end of the list that I'll be talking about as well. So, all right, number 17, this is an interesting one. This is 7 Steps to the Green Door and The Truth. This came out June 28th, Neo-Prog from Germany. This is actually the third in a trio of concept records that are all tied together. The first was The Book from 2011, and then The Lie from 2019. There was an album in between there that broke up the trilogy a bit called Fetish from 2015, which I really love. A really cool eclectic prog record that brought my attention to this band. But this album in particular is a really interesting concept album that has a lot of different guests on it, a lot of different vocalists. Think of an Ailon project, but not as much metal, more prog focused. A lot of pleasant saxophone throughout the record from Merrick Arnold, who's a main member of this group. It's really eclectic music, in fact, that portrays these songs in different styles. It has a baseline of that melodic neo-prog, but they're not afraid to delve into heavier, almost prog metal riffage at times, some clever art pop, some symphonic style passages or jazzy moments. It runs the gamut between all these different styles and feels, but keeps itself grounded in the neo-prog style. I love hearing Peter Jones' vocals on here, who's part of Tiger Moth Tales and has been a guest vocalist on a lot of different things. His voice is featured here amongst many others. A lot of names that I wasn't too familiar with, but maybe are known more in like kind of this German prog scene. Really fantastic release. Really surprised me, and I've loved these releases because of the eclecticism, because they're willing to go into different genres and styles and keep it grounded in a really interesting storyline. So definitely well worth checking out. And then I have SJS, A Sequence of Mistakes. This is from August 7th. This is Neo-Prog from Australia. This is a project by a man named Stuart J. Stahman, who contributes guitars and vocals to this. And it's a blend of different style genres, even though it's rooted in that neo-prog. We have some post-rock, some folk, some world music, some modern electronic textures, some great vocal harmonies throughout the record that I really enjoyed, especially in the opening Tear Gas. You get some additional female vocals from Kirsty Forster to accompany Stewart's vocals as well. Beautiful atmospheric prog, kind of in the style of like Anathema. Beautiful atmosphere and keyboard textures are highlighted in The King of the Room. Almost has a bit of like a Tears for Fears maybe style vibe to me. Drift to Shore adds kind of an Eastern style acoustic feel with unique guitar picking. And I love the closing epic. It's a 13-minute epic full of Floydian atmospheres and pleasant neo-prog stylings. Just beautiful harmonies, almost a jazzier tinge at time. It's hard to describe this record. Some people say that this artist is really inspired by Mike Oldfield, so that could be a reference point. A lot of different styles. I feel a lot of Pink Floyd influences, definitely centered on neo-prog, but a lot of cool vocal moments, and it's just really beautiful to kind of sit back and let it wash over you. So definitely a strong recommendation. I think this is a really cool release. And then, once again, sorry for the pronunciation, we've got another album here from Norway that's all in Norwegian. This is Truska and Stobmork. This is from August 16th. This is their third album, and I think their description in their Bandcamp page, they say that the lineup point towards ELP, but they're equally inspired by Yes, Rush, and King Crimson, as well as the Beatles, Radiohead, and modern jazz, fusion, and pop. The result is Truska's energetic, catchy, progressive pop with lyrics in their native Norwegian. So that's a pretty good description of what you can expect. A hodgepodge, a mixture of a lot of different styles, centered in this kind of progressive rock/pop vein. Really catchy stuff going on here. A lot of great harmony vocals. I almost thought of like a band like Von Herzen Brothers, but a bit of a jazzier tinge to this band, in fact. I really love some of the funk flavor that they get into, some really cool sax solos. We have some bluesiness in the guitar riffs. Really love the last track, which is Satan's Disco. What a great name for a prog epic. It's 12 minutes of pure prog delight with some really incredible jazzy moments, some bouncing catchiness, some almost King Crimson-esque heavy prog moments. It just really takes you on a journey and is fun the whole way through and catchy and just has these infectious melodies. I just absolutely adore it. I think this is one of the strongest releases on the list. I just can't help but listen to this and smile. It's right up my alley of like cool progressive rock that is exciting and fun and interesting, but grounded in this kind of pop sensibility. So it's catchy, grabs your ear, makes you want to re-listen, and that's what I come to music for. So it's definitely a high recommendation. And then finally, the last of the trio of Opeth-related releases, this is Ubiquity, and the album The Ascendant Travels Among the Stars. This came out September 15th. And once again, if you're not a fan of heavy growling vocals, then steer clear of this. It definitely has it in spades. Just definitely a lot of that extreme metal stuff going on here. But of course, there's some clean vocals as well mixed within. So it's not just purely heaviness, but it's definitely in the vein of like, you know, Still Life and Blackwater Park Opeth. If you love that era of the band, then this is going to be for you. Some really cool melodic prog death metal with some great organ work, some dark passages. It's a concept record about the reimagined life of infamous serial killer Jack the Ripper. So there's a bit of a storyline going throughout, which helps me understand the more growling vocals, that it's going for a certain style to tell this very dark story. So and what's cool is they're not just an Opeth clone, they add their own quirky sensibility to this music that adds a lot of layers and sound to them. Standout bass work abounds on Red Moon, which contains a great folky clean section with bluesy guitar soloing amidst all of the more brutal sections. The Traveler contains typical Opeth-style riffs and tasty bluesy soloing. In a Blink adds some cool off-kilter organ sounds and almost a funky beat at times to it. Endless Depths just has some really incredible riffs and grooves all the way throughout that are just totally fun to listen to and really inspire you to like headbang along and want to be part of this like really heavy music. So it's a really fun listen. If you like that heavier style, if you're not a fan of the heavy vocals, then yeah, probably steer clear of this. But because they're mixed with some good cleans, and I do appreciate some of Opeth's classic work, I actually did really like this and found there to be a lot of good progginess to enjoy and to digest. So those are the 20 releases, a lot to get through, a lot mentioned here. Hopefully something grabbed your ear, your attention. I'm going to put a list of all of the albums that I've talked about in the description so you can go seek them out wherever they are, on Bandcamp, through streaming services, or buying their physical copy through CD or vinyl or whatever. You know, most of these are available out there through any of those formats. Some are a little bit harder to come across, perhaps, because they're a bit more obscure, but I think you can Google search most of these and find the music in whatever capacity you like to enjoy your music in. So hopefully you appreciated this. Let me know in the comments how you feel about any of these records, or if I missed anything from this last quarter that really grabbed your attention. I would love to hear about it. So thank you guys so much, and I'll hopefully catch you guys in a future episode. Bye everybody, enjoy the music.